excited to talk about sex? We eat after lunch, right? Okay, so I am Elizabeth Hudson. I am a spiritual teacher of over 20 years now of Kundalini Yoga and meditation. I'm a certified life coach, transformational life coach, and relationship coach. And I created the Sacred Alchemy podcast, which is about conscious, healed, spiritual sexuality. Now, if you have told me that I was going to be doing a podcast about conscious spirituality 6 years ago when I was in the middle of a divorce and a mother of 2 children with an overwrought nervous system, I would have thought you were nuts. Why on earth would I do that? But as women, we know that when we are called to do something, it often doesn't make a lot of sense here, but it makes sense here, right? So when we follow the heart chakra, we're often led to do great things. And I love the saying, leap and the net will appear. Be bold and mighty forces will come to your aid. And so that's what I did in starting my little podcast. I said yes. I said a big yes, even though it made literally no sense to me. And when you say yes to something that is a risk, these forces come to your aid. So I had producers show up. I had friends want to do the podcast. All the resources came together, and before I knew it, I was doing this podcast around sexuality, which felt very uncomfortable, right? So little did I know that soon after that, our Kundalini Yoga community would be rocked by a sex scandal. And we've seen this time and time again with the patriarchy, have we not, right? Men in leadership, in positions of power, taking advantage through the sacral chakra over and over and over again. So we've seen it in multiple spiritual leaders in the yoga community, in the Catholic Church, et cetera, et cetera. So it's a lot of that do as I say, not as I do, that we are in that energy that's imposed upon us. And there's so much hypocrisy around the sacral chakra. There's so much toxic, unhealed energy. And at the time when I was speaking about this, I felt like, wow, this is a really important thing that I'm talking about. And I hadn't realized that when I started it, quite how important and impactful it was. And it really, I will say humbly, it really made me dismantle my own idea, my own need for a hero. That was really heartbreaking to me, how much I needed a hero, and there wasn't one. And the one that I had held up and heralded was in fact false. And it made me step into my own power as a heroine, that I am all I need, and that I do not need to put anything between me and God. There is a direct channel that comes down, and that's what we are as women. And that's what we hold as bearers of wounds. We hold that conduit of divine energy through our bodies and into this world. And there is nothing more powerful than that. This is a very pivotal time right now. The Epstein files, I don't know how much you're aware of what's coming out in that, but we are seeing levels of abuse that we could not even imagine from the patriarchy, from men in power. And this is why we gather here as women. Whenever we gather in collective healing, we link arms and join forces in healing. So a few years ago, I did a post about this after the death of the singer Sinead O'Connor. And it went fairly viral on social media. And I was saying, we still burn witches in the court of public opinion. And when she got up there on SNL, I don't know if you all remember this, when she ripped the picture of the Pope and she said, fight the real enemy. And her point was calling out the Catholic Church for the abuses on systematic abuses of children and the cover-up thereof. And it turned out what she was talking about proved to be true. But she was ridiculed, she was ostracized, she was condemned, and she was very much burned at the stake. When she got up in events after that, she was booed off stage. And so we risk that when we stand up to be a voice for truth. We risk being the witch burned at the stake. And that's what we are all doing, and we must do. And it's one of the most powerful saying yeses we can do, right? Over the years, one of my greatest pleasures is gathering women in consciousness. So I have taught prenatal classes, mommy and me classes, women's classes, and gathered women around the globe on retreats. And one thing I've seen over and over and over again is that everybody shows up like, I don't know you, who are you, and question each other, and then by the end of the weekend we're all best friends. And there's nothing better than that. So 2 retreats in particular stand out to me. One was in Ojai, California, and we were doing this incredibly powerful mantra. We were doing a chant, and it's called the Adi Shakti mantra, which means the mother power mantra. And I remember as we were doing it, I was like, oh boy, whew, buckle up, it's starting to get really high in here. I could feel the energy rising, it was getting really powerful. And we all had dinner immediately after, and it was mushroom risotto was being served. And more, I think 3 or 4 women came up to me after and was like, was there something in that mushroom risotto with those magic mushrooms? And I said, no, that was your magic being ignited. That is your Kundalini energy rising up your spine, waking up your heart chakra, and emboldening you to inspiration and your higher powers. And that's what we are all capable of, but we have forgotten. We must remember. Another one of my favorite retreats, this was probably my biggest retreat. I had 30 women in California also. And I invited everybody to come as their favorite goddess. So you could dress like her, you could just go by her name, you could educate others about her. Maybe it represented your culture, your heritage, your background, or somebody that you were seeking to be more like. So we had a number of goddesses represented. We had the goddess Bhagavati. Bhagavati is a Hindu goddess. And she is depicted with 8 arms, kind of grooving along back on the back of the tiger, right? 4 of her arms carry gifts, blessings, the more nurturing aspects of the feminine, and 4 of her arms carry weapons, the more fierce aspect of the feminine. And she is every woman. We are that multitasking goddess with the 8 arms. We are the nurturers, we are the givers, but we are also, you do not mess with Mama Bear, right? There is nothing more fierce in nature. Another goddess that I loved that was represented was the Buddhist goddess White Tara. White Tara is all about sensitivity, grace, magnetism, when the feminine is relaxed, as we are naturally meant to be. As Marianne Williamson says, men must do, women simply are. And when we simply are, we attract everything we need. Let's all take a breath just to get this. As we remember what that should feel like, right? The other goddess that I think is worth noting was Pele, our local Hawaiian goddess of the volcanic fire, that she is the power of not only creation but destruction, and inherent in destruction, the reemergence, the renewal that is what life is about. That we are, all of us as women, that divine feminine energy is the phoenix from the ashes that will rise again and again and renew. So I will say, when I started this podcast, I had to overcome a lot of the feeling of, what will people think? What will they think of me? Are they going to judge me? Are they going to mock me? Oh God, what will my ex-husband think? What will my family think? Oh, this is so tedious, right? And I grew up in a very conservative, kind of waspy environment. There was a lot of judgment and a lot of homogeny. And I remember going to a cocktail party soon after I had started the podcast, and a woman came up to me and she said, so I've listened to your podcast and I don't understand what the hell spirituality has to do with sexuality. And I looked over at her husband, and it was like 4 drinks into the evening, bragging about his golf game, and I was like, yeah, I can see how that might be a problem. But seriously, that is how distorted we are around sexuality, that we don't see that divine energy, that our pleasure, that our portal is God. It is an expression of divine energy. So initially I called the podcast Sexual Alchemy, but sexual, I don't know if you've ever noticed, has a very provocative word, right? It's very titillating. It proved to be a little too titillating for algorithms, and kind of misled the point of the podcast. It was really about spirituality. So I changed it to Sacred Alchemy, sacred for the sacral chakra. The etymology of the word meaning holy, sacrum, holy, consecrated to a deity. and alchemy, which is that transmutational force that literally, we talk about turning lead to gold. Our transmutational force, when we heal, then we change that energy into pure magic. And we move from the banal to the profound. So in our creative aspect, it is the polarity that brings reproduction, right? It is the polarity of the masculine energy and the feminine energy. The masculine energy being the left brain, the logical, the more rigid, and the feminine being the right brain, seeking the questions, the intuition, the magic. And I really try to approach my podcast from a right brain perspective. I really try to approach the subject of sexuality, as complex and nuanced and complicated as it is, from the perspective of asking questions, being available, being open, and the possibility within that. So over the 6 years, I've had an amazing variety of guests. I've had some really fascinating guests. I've had everything from abuse survivors to yogis to sex tantric healers to I had one woman who was a Jungian coach, shadow coach, and was a former dominatrix. Interesting. Some of my favorites, I would start with my favorite being Guru Singh. Guru Singh was my coach, my mentor. He is a yogi. He was a legend in his own time. He's in his 80s now, but he dated Janis Joplin, and he's a singer, and he's a brilliant man. And he talked about the magic in monogamy. That when we are committed to a monogamous relationship, if we allow ourselves in our ADD culture to actually go deeper and keep going with the same person, that there is such magic in that relationship. I had another woman, Vanessa Cuccia, and she started a company called Shock Rubs. And Shock Rubs are sex toys or dildos made out of crystals. So they're from rose quartz or obsidian or amethyst, and she talks about using the principles of the crystals in healing the sacral chakra. And one of the most, my favorite guest was this woman, Catherine Zarensky, and she is actually a local, she calls herself a womb shaman, and she gave birth to her daughter under the full moon in the bay here in Hawaii. And she said that was an incredibly transformative experience for her, and opened up her ability to see our bodies as portals and as pleasure centers, and that is our birthright, that is our God-given gift. And I'm going to quote her because she was quite brilliant. She said, "We have this technology in our bodies, and when this technology is cleaned off and tuned to its highest capacity, we are tuning forks for truth and love. We are the receptive, transmittive beings of the intelligence of the cosmos coming through us. This is our capacity, and this is our birthright." Right? Like affirmation chills. I want to note that my brothers on this journey have been especially important. The men that I have connected to around the world who've just been amazing, who are doing the deeper work for the divine masculine, who are really showing up to say, I don't want to be like the toxic model of masculinity, what power is, that is devoid of empathy, that is devoid of sensitivity. I want to show up in a new way. And they are leaders in that arena, and I have connected to men all over the world, so we can feel a little hopeful that there are some really good men doing good work out there. Two in particular that I've had on twice. One guy, David Lee, he's a men's coach, and he talks about, unfortunately, how the model of the masculine that doesn't want to be the bully became a little more passive and gave their power away. And so he's talking about a new model of masculinity that is healed, that is present, that is conscious, but also free from the old pattern. I had another guy, a psychologist named Jordan Flesher, who was a riot. He's really all about manifestation through sex magic, connecting the heart chakra, using your energy to create magic. And what I love about him is he talks about worshiping the woman in the bedroom, allowing her to be the goddess, and what is created when the female is allowed to feel safe and open and magical, and the generosity of spirit that gets circulated in that energetic arrangement. One of the biggest messages that I seek to impart in my podcast is that we must free ourselves from shame, and that shame and trauma and abuse too often live within the sacral chakra collectively. Mary Magdalene is quoted as saying, when we trample underfoot shame, we enter the kingdom of heaven. So statistically, 1 in 3 girls, 1 in 5 boys are abused in their lifetime. And so too many of us suffer distortions around our sexuality because of this. We associate sexuality with words like naughty, bad, dirty. Why is that, right? We have taken on this belief that somehow our sexuality is something to be ashamed of. So I see healing on 3 levels. First of all, we have to kind of get to the root of that shame or trauma. We have to individually and collectively root out whatever that darkness and shadow is and bring the shadow to the light. You know, I've often found that a lot of people who have fetishes or kinks, it's often a trauma that's trying to be worked out. In the same way as we seek a relationship that's similar to our abuser, to work out that energy. So once we've kind of done that inner work, done the deeper work, we can get to a more neutral state. That neutral state is what we came in with. That is our innocence. That is our playfulness. That is our ability to see ourselves as joyful, and that pleasure is normal and happy and we deserve it. And from that space, we move into the expansion. That's where the alchemy begins. That's when we start to see ourselves in more than just human, that we are in fact divine expressions of God. So it's really to imagine what else is possible from here, that we can see our pleasure as a divine portal, that we can see ourselves as expression of divine energy. The sacred alchemy is really the dance of the divine in our finite forms as human beings. I want to offer you guys a vision. So I came here a few days ago, and I had the opportunity on the night of the full moon, which was the blood moon, to be out at Kaena Point. And Kaena Point on this island is an incredibly sacred land. It is believed the place where souls depart the earth. So it is the leaping off point. And so when we talk about the dying of the old world, we talk about the dying off of the patriarchy, we talk about the dying off of the old ways. In that moment on Kaena Point on the 3rd, I was walking along with a friend, and I watched the full moon rise up over the mountain, between myself, the mountains, and the ocean, and the moon. And I want to remind us that we are the energy of that moon. We are the rising of that divine energy. And when we link arms and we see each other and we remember who we really are and how powerful we really are, that is what is possible. So yes, it is a dying world, but it must. And it's time, because we are it is reborn through us. And so thank you for sharing this vision with me today. Bless you all. Mahalo.
Thank you. Wonderful.